Of course, Starbucks is not a philanthropy. They are doing it for their self-interest. That's how they were able to print those socially responsible sourcing procurements and so on the coffee cups that you're buying. There is an image, there is a possible image here. So here is my view, is that I think what we are faced with in the conflict mineral side is that for environmental issues and perhaps child labor and so on, consumers oftentimes will cry out loudly if they found that a company is violating. And as a result, companies pay attention and try to use that in response to manage their supply chain. Like Starbucks and like Nike and Adidas, they try to track the supply chain, make sure that they're not polluting and they're not using child labor or excessive overtime, because they know the consequence is much more severe. In some cases, they actually save money by environmentally improving the process. So of course, and it's a much better incentive because they actually save money. But in conflict mineral, I think that we are still not quite there, where companies will recognize that if I'm found guilty, what is the consequence? Of course, legal is good. We heard about from friends this morning, just enough projects, that legislation is one. But I think legislation should only be the first step. Remember that environmental issues, the first step, the environment is legal law. Law also requires you cannot pollute, and there are all kinds of regulations. And the companies will do the minimum to try to meet those legal requirements. It is only when they recognize that there are much more bigger stake in reputation, risk, and also maybe liabilities, as well as potential consumer reaction, that they will rise and do things differently. Here is an example where the apparel companies recognize this. And so they recognize also a single company could not do much. And so they actually organize themselves, and the whole industry is disorganizing. But this is on the environmental side, this green side, where they try to track where your cotton and the fabrics and the knitting mill and the weaving mills, what kind of chemicals do they use, what kind of water do they use, so you can track and see whether they are environmentally sound. And again, because the incentive is there, it's recognized here. So in the electronic side of the conflict mineral side, can we use name and shame as one way? Legislature is another way. But ultimately, I'm hoping that the reputation risk should be larger than, it should be much larger, just similar to the environmental concerns issues, or when Nike was faced with that time, just 10 years ago, when they were faced with finding out some of the suppliers were using the child labor, or when Mattel, the toy company, was discovered that they were paying the use by a supplier, then they took actions immediately. They would take much more action. So I think we need to find a way to instill sense and response in the conflict mineral supply chain as well, so that companies' supply chains are willing to also do similar sense and response pursuit, similar to the environmental efforts and social responsibility and other risk management efforts for the external disturbances. Okay, so that's my last slide, and giving you a high-level overview. Patricia.
So, hello, I'm Patricia Jurewicz, and this is Zoe McMahon, and I'm actually going to, we have a shared slide deck, so I'm going to let her go first because she's going to give you a little bit more detail about where the minerals exactly are in the supply chain and how that all works, and then I'll come back and talk more about some of the multi-stakeholder efforts as well as the shareholder efforts that we've been using to engage companies. My bio is in the outline, but just to go over it quick, I work at As You Sow and started a project called the Responsible Sourcing Network. And what that is looking at are the really egregious human rights and environmental abuses happening in the supply chain at the raw commodity level. And when you're that deep into the supply chain, I really see it as needing industry efforts and multi-stakeholder efforts to really figure out the solutions for what needs to be done, rather than just any one company being able to change the situation. So I think we'll give a little bit more background on the exact supply chain, and I'll come back and talk more about how we're going about finding some of those solutions.
Thanks, Patricia. And I think it was back in October 2009 when I may have met Patricia for the first time in San Francisco at a conference. And that night we cooked up what ended up being the multi-stakeholder network for conflict minerals. And so I'm really proud that actually those conversations in the bar that night went so far. And you'll hear a little more about that later on. Maybe we need to go to the bar again and take it to the next level. So let's talk about, educate you a little bit about conflict minerals in IT products. I'm not a product engineer, but I'll try to bring it down to some practical terms for you. So the four metals, you've probably heard that this morning, we're talking about the minerals of concern, or minerals of tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold. And these four metals are used in a whole wide range of applications, both electrical and non-electrical. The jewelry you wear, of course, is gold. A lot of aerospace, medical products, other things like that use these metals excuse me, considerably. And you see here for tantalum and tin, we are, in the electronics industry, predominant users. In the case of tantalum, 60% of the world's tantalum consumption goes into electronic devices. Of course, electronics is not just IT, it could be fridges, video goods, all the whole range of electronics. In the case of tin, it's around 35%, 36%. Gold, we use gold quite a lot in various parts of our product, but the majority of the consumption of gold is not in IT products. And I make this point because over the last 2 years, the electronics industry in particular was targeted for the conflict minerals problem. And whilst we don't deny our part in the solution, to be able to move the needle in changing the way in which minerals are bought in the supply chain, it's absolutely crucial that we involve other sectors and other consumers of these metals, not just IT. So it's not just an IT industry problem. Just to give you a sense of where these metals are used, so typically tantalum mostly is used in electronic capacitors, which are used in circuit boards for your electronic devices, although it is used in a number of different parts of a laptop or a computer or something. Tin is typically used in solder or solder paste to connect the components on your circuit boards, and so it's used ubiquitously really throughout electronics. Tungsten is hardly used at all, but in a number of different places, and gold in mostly connecting where you need strong conduction of electricity. So you won't be able to read this, but what I want to get across here is that if you take a typical laptop, it weighs around 2 kilos, at least it did a year ago, it probably weighs less now, and you break down all the materials in a laptop, around 36% of it is metal. And if you break down that metal, you get this pie chart where the majority, in fact, is copper, and then stainless steel, aluminium, iron, and then a whole range of other things. And eventually, you get to tin, which is the biggest one. Around about 2% of the metals in a product are tin, around 10 grams in a 2-kilogram laptop. And then you go to tantalum, where you have 0.6 grams per 2-kilogram laptop, and it goes further down until you get to tungsten, where you have a very, very small number. And so, although it's been very, very associated with product, the actual material levels we're talking about are very small, which isn't, again, to deny that we have a responsibility, but just to give you a sense of the scale of the problem and the scale of the influence that we can have on the situation is somewhat limited and requires us to act as an industry, as a multi-industry, and across all sectors. So it's not as simple. Some people think, well, they're used like in maybe 50% of the product. We're really talking tiny things here.